Ladies and gentlemen, we are live with Lee Ewan, who is a breathwork guru, cold exposure aficionado, Wim Hof disciple, and more. And we are going to talk today mainly about, I think, breathwork, which is booming at the moment. And you are, well, first of all, tell us, how do you think about breathwork? What is it for you?
Well, I'm a classic example of a male who wants to be an athlete and sort of like want to push. And the answer is always like to keep going, like work harder. But somewhere along the line, I learned also that there's the other side of it. The wheels can fall off pretty quickly, right? So I wanted to, I guess you could say my motto now is more like work hard, rest harder, recover, like focus on the recovery basically. And the breath work was sort of like an eye opener for me. Like training with Wim Hof and training with some of these kind of modern day pioneers, it was like a game changer for me, and my sort of performance increased because of it.
So for you, breathwork is a key part of recovery?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's also a key part of performance, but if you look at sleep, that's one of the first places where you can actually get major improvements in your performance just because you're resting. Mm-hmm. And a lot of how you breathe during rest and breathing how you like during sleep is a big catalyst for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of power to kind of focus on these things which we're doing all the time, consciously, unconsciously, sleep, breath, study up on it.
Yeah.
So what are the key principles of like breathing properly?
Well, first of all, breathing through the nose. That's the most efficient way to breathe.
Everyone, breathe through the nose.
Yes.
Take notes.
Breathe through your nose, take notes. Breathing through your nose, like I always say 23 hours of the day you should be breathing through your nose. Yeah. For the other hour, it might be another breathwork practice, or it might be just when you're kind of like under more load and you're in the gym, you're like or running or doing some athletic endeavors.
Rule number 1, breathe through the nose. Rule number 2, refer to rule number 1.
Well, actually, I would say that rule number 2 is that CO2 is not necessarily the evil that we all think it is. Mm-hmm. In actual fact, CO2 and the accumulation of CO2 inside the bloodstream allows the oxygen to be released from the plasma, from the hemoglobin, right? So in actual fact, if you've ever seen someone have a hyperventilation before, it's a classic example. So you see somebody like, you can't just tell that person to breathe more. Mm-hmm. So what do? We give them, the intervention is the brown paper bag, right?
Oh, increases CO2.
Yes, they expel CO2 into the brown paper bag and then they breathe it back in again. Of course, the CO2 level rises inside the bloodstream and then the oxygen actually releases from the blood.
Okay.
So it's a key signaling, that's the signal to release the oxygen. Yeah.
So rule number 2 is, don't demonize CO2, but what does that mean for practice or for general life?
Well, so now it's all, in the athletic field, it's all about CO2 tolerance. Mm-hmm. How much CO2 can you kind of like stand in a way before you get too uncomfortable? I'm also a free diver, so the role of CO2 is really, really important there. And that's why we don't do this kind of like hyperventilation, like this like superventilation or hyperventilation. Wim Hof method techniques is a version of this.
Yes.
We don't try and practice this anywhere near the water, of course, because you can actually feel dizzy and you can black out. Okay. But then we don't also want to do hyperventilation when we're going free diving. Okay. Because we need there to be that signal. We need, like, you won't get that signal if you're under the water and you don't have any CO2 rising, Mm-hmm.
And so the Wim Hof method, which is the super trendy one that's going around the world multiple times, is mainly focused around hyperventilation, and there is a obvious importance for that, which is about what is the importance of the hyperventilation side?
Well, basically, it's a kind of a delicate play between sort of the sympathetic state, because it's like, for those who don't know, the Wim Hof method is actually like a 30 or 40 breaths, deep inhalations, actually not necessarily through the nose, but just
fast, pushing the limit.
Yeah, like this. And you could say it's a sympathetic state, driven breath practice, right? Initially. Yep. But then we have this little moment where we call it
fight or flight state.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's like a seesaw. We're seesawing between the parasympathetic and sympathetic state, because then after we're breathing in this manner, we do this little thing called retention. Mm-hmm. So you're breathing and then you just pause. Mm-hmm. You let the CO2 build back up. And then when you really feel
pause breath out.
you
Breath in, then breath out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we retain, and then when we really feel that strong urge to breathe, we inhale again, we hold that in for another 15 seconds,
Yeah.
and then we start the next round.
Yeah.
Now, what's happening inside of the body there is that we're breathing, and actually we're dumping a bit of CO2 out as well along the way. But then when we're doing the pause, we're allowing that CO2 to accumulate, right? Because your body's constantly producing CO2, even when you're like in this resting state. When we feel that strong urge to breathe, usually your diaphragm will start bumping around a little bit, jumping around. You can stretch it a little bit further, and then we inhale, and that's where we actually get the oxygen delivery. We're kind of like saturating the oxygen comes in because it's deprived of oxygen, and it just uses that immediately. So you get all this really lovely tingling sensations and quite euphoric feeling. And
Yes.
some people see flashes.
Highest you can get without drugs, more or less.
Get high on your own supply, he says. Yeah,
Air
exactly.
supply.
Yeah.
And so that's the Wim Hof method. That's like one sort of school of thought. The more trendy one.
Yeah.
What about the other schools of thought? How do they differ?
Yeah, there's Buteyko method and oxygen advantage, which is primarily referring to breathe light to breathe right, which means breathe less. Allow a little. So let's just say it like
Oxygen fasting.
this. In a way, it's looking at the breath in four parts. There's four parts to it. One breath. It's not just an inhale and exhale. There's sort of an inhale. There's a pause. There's a gentle exhale. Then there's a pause at the bottom. And what we're essentially doing is allowing a little bit more CO2 to build up to get the oxygen delivery.
By being gentle instead of Wim Hof,
Yeah.
which is aggressive breathing, and this is the opposite.
Yeah, it's just
Soft as
I would say Wim Hof is trying to get towards a certain state quite quickly, right? But for the other 23 hours of the day, breathing less is actually much, much better. You got to remember as well, when we're introducing oxygen into the body, it's basically breaking down nutrients, right? And creating ATP.
oxidizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the more you breathe, the more your body wants to produce energy.
And you only have a limited number of breaths.
Well, hey, just on that, I mean, like there's a lot of school of thought that between 6 to 12 breaths in a minute is the optimal rate.
Okay.
So the exercise we did earlier today, 4, 7, 8. A lot of people say 6, 7, 8 breaths in a minute is actually quite difficult. But think about 4, 7, 8. So the 4, 7, 8 was a 4-second inhale, then a 7-second pause, then an 8-second exhale.
Nice.
If we add those
and then
together-
a direct inhale or a pause at the end as well?
No, it's just a loop. So
Okay.
4-second inhale.
Three-part loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you add those seconds together, 8 plus 7 plus 4, it's like 19 seconds.
Yeah.
So 3 or 4 of those breaths will easily get you, a minute right there.
Nice.
So you can really, really reduce the rate of breath, and it's much more calmer. And when we allow the CO2 to open up, CO2 is a vasodilator as well. So it opens up the branches of the lungs, the bronchi and bronchioli, and it just makes it much, much more easier to actually breathe. It opens up the whole chest.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we've covered the Wim Hof method, Buteyko method. We've spoken about the interplay between oxygen and carbon dioxide. What about the other player in the gases, nitric oxide?
Nitric oxide,
Yeah?
yeah, it's a key one. You can only get this,
Which is referred to as the miracle molecule, one of the miracle molecules.
Yeah, actually, it was. I think it was 1992. It was Molecule of the Year for whatever that's worth.
Win.
I didn't know that was an award, but anyway. But yeah,
I'd like to thank Mom.
yeah, Mother Nature, that is. Basically, it accumulates up in the paranasal sinus, right? And it's because of the pressure of air that comes in through the nose, where it kind of spools up. And it comes up into the top of your
Another
sinus
reason
here.
to nasal breathe.
The main reason, one of the main reasons. Again, nitric oxide's a vasodilator as well, but it also has antifungal and antiseptic properties. So any pathogens cruising around in the basically anywhere in the face,
Coronas.
it helps. Yeah, it's really worthwhile to breathe through your nose.
Yep.
And then the other thing that it does as well is that it's super. It's being basically given to people with asthma, right? It's as a diagnosis, or as a treatment, let's say. Breathe lighter, allow a little bit of time, allow the CO2 to rise so that you can open up your lungs, and then open up the branches of your lungs, and it's much more relaxed way of breathing.
Nice. And do you know about this this idea? I heard it through Jamie Wheel about when you do that nasal breathe out,
Yeah.
the om sound through there, it also stimulates the nitric oxide. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, we were doing a bit of that on the stage earlier.
Yeah.
So it increases the production of nitric oxide by like a huge amount.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because of the vibrational effect.
Yeah.
So it actually loosens that up and allows that to flood in through the sinuses and then goes down into your lungs.
I think it's a kind of like hippie kind of om chanting thing, but actually it's a pure biohack as well.
It is. I mean, look, the more that we're kind of like
Ancient wisdom.
checking the science and the research is kind of backing up what the yogis and people from pranayama world have been saying all along, right?
Epic.
Right from back bends all the way to how we breathe. And you know, they've been practicing belly breathing, which is basically rinsing the stomach. It's literally called rinsing the stomach is a translation. And it's incredible for your digestion just by breathing in a certain way.
Amazing. And I hope you've been able to appreciate the kind of amount of depth you can go into something that you've just been doing instinctively since you were born. So thank you for sharing.
Of course. Yeah.
If you had to leave the audience with one key, most powerful, most important idea from your body of work, what would that be?
I think I would say that I try and keep it positive, but I think there's a lot of people that go through this life and don't truly understand what these bodies are capable of. You know, we live in these like little comfort, you know, protective. We every now and then we've got to stretch it out. You know, like a car, you got to put the pedal to the metal a little bit and see what they're made out of, you know, and trust the body as well. People get a little bit disconnected from it. So I think if we're more in tune and with our feelings and like what's happening inside of our bodies, it feels much better, and it's a more fulfilling life, you know, right? Whether it's cold exposure, whether it's sauna, whether it's breathing in the right way, all of these things. I mean, I just want more people to be able to experience their own body, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much. And until the next episode.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.